Japanese had a very different education system that we thought would be really interesting. We're going to start with our first speaker, who's Nick. He's going to talk about primary education in the United States. Andrew is not here, so we are going to move on to secondary education in the United States, which will be presented by me. Then we'll have Max talk about Japanese education and secondary education, and then we'll take a short break, and then we will resume with Lauren and Adriana talking about higher education in Japan and in the United States. So one last thing before we begin, I want to ask that you guys write down any questions that you have and save them till the end, where we will open up for comments and questions. So let's welcome our first guest speaker, Nick.
Thank you, Pilar. Good morning, class. I'm going to start off today talking a little bit about education in the United States, particularly elementary school or primary school education. So, first off, there's a saying that kind of goes, the best way to get ahead is to use the one you've got, and I think that really starts in elementary school. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the format of elementary school, kind of how it's set up, a little bit about the curriculum and what topics are covered pretty much, and lastly some issues that are kind of circulating in the elementary school system right now. So first off, I'm going to start with a question. How many of you guys went to kindergarten through 5th or 6th grade elementary school? Okay. So a lot of you guys. Yeah, those are the two most common forms found in the United States. There's actually some schools that go all the way kindergarten through 8th grade. It's unusual, but it's not unheard of. And some schools even through 10th grade, which is kind of weird. But yeah, so that's the most common form. And how it works is your child, most of you are pretty familiar with this, but your child enters into kindergarten, or sometimes skips kindergarten, and basically at the end of the year, your teacher decides whether or not you have met the standards and you can move on to the next grade. And that's how it works all through 5th or 6th grade. So up until then, your teacher decides whether or not you've met or you're proficient enough to move on. So, and but one of the issues with that though is that children often learn at different levels or have different styles of learning. So it can be hard for a child sometimes to keep up with the rest of the class. And that's where programs like subgrades kind of are implemented. And Diane Weaver Dunn of educationworld.com talks a lot about those. And what those are, they're not actually grades at all, but rather kind of like after-school programs or tutoring programs that kind of help kids to maintain their grades and stay on top of their schoolwork and stuff. So nobody likes to, nobody wants to get held back, and it can be embarrassing for a student. So those subgrades are kind of implemented to prevent that. Secondly, I'm going to give you guys a little insight on what topics are covered in elementary school. Basically, you have one teacher usually, and that teacher kind of knows, they're well educated on a bunch of subjects. So what you learn a little bit about a lot of things. Those topics include math, writing, reading, spelling, history. But oftentimes what schools will do is they'll have other teachers that are more educated in things like science or physical education, or even in arts. They'll have you go visit their classrooms for maybe an hour or two, once or twice a week, and that way you can get a little more educated in those topics. My own experience kind of mirrored that. I went to Boulder Creek Elementary School, which is right over Highway 9 in Boulder Creek, and I had a single teacher every year, kindergarten through 6th grade, and she taught me, or they all taught me a bunch of good information. But to really dive into my sciences and stuff, I had a different science teacher every year, and my whole class would go as a whole, which it's a pretty standard format. So kind of helps get you more well-rounded. Lastly, elementary schools they teach you more than just academics. A lot of times schools will have teacher-parent outreach programs to try and help parents create a more stable learning environment at home so that your child can really thrive in education. So, and also they encourage parents to work with the school, kind of just sitting with the class and kind of help kids out. My mom did that, and my aunt did that too. So, lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the most notable issues in elementary schools today. So, one of those is teacher-student ratios. Elementary school enrollment is actually way higher than it used to be. More kids are going to school, studying at an early age. But one issue with that is the teachers' budgets can't really accommodate teachers, especially in this economic crisis. So the ratio is kind of hard to maintain because class sizes need to be smaller, but more enrollment is occurring, and also teachers can't really be afforded. So there's a Nietzsche quote that I like, and I feel like it's applicable to this situation. It kind of says, in large states, public education will always be mediocre for the same reason that in large kitchens the cooking is usually bad. And to me, that kind of means like the more hands-on, personal, smaller approach really helps you to thrive. And that's kind of been hindering our education in primary school. So, lastly, cultural differences. There's a lot of cultural differences in the United States. We're kind of like a melting pot, so there's many different cultures. And that can be kind of hard when you look at the curriculum and you decide what to include, because different cultures learn about different things and have different values. For instance, the Southwest and the Midwest, those are kind of contrasting. There's a lot of different cultural values there, so it can be difficult to decide what to teach children. So today I've talked a little bit about elementary school. I've told you guys some information on how the system works, kind of what topics are covered in the system. I shared a little bit about my own personal experiences with elementary school and how the processes I went through, and lastly some issues with the system. So I'd like to challenge you guys. If you ever have children, I'd like you guys to try and take part in their education and help them get through it the best that they can. So, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Pilar, and she's going to continue.
So let me ask you guys something. How many of you went to high school in the United States? Okay, so about most of you. Well, whether or not you went to high school in California or Maryland, there are some distinctive similarities in the way the education system is in high school. Those similarities can be summed up with 3 words: English, educate, and enable. Let's start with my first word, English. Some of you may not know that English is actually not the national set language in America. In fact, there is no national set language in the United States. Yet English is still required to be taught in school. Although there has been some debate whether or not there should be a bilingual education taught in the United States. And as Rosalie Porter, Director of the Institute for Research in English Acquisition and Development, she explains that bilingual education is a classic example of an experiment that was begun with the best of humanitarian intentions, but has turned out to be terribly wrong-headed. The accumulated research of the past 30 years reveals almost no justification for teaching children in their native languages to help them learn either English or other subjects. And these are the chief objectives of all legislation and judicial decisions in the field. So even though there is not bilingual language that's required in the United States, English really is the best possibility to teach in high school. So now that I've talked to you guys a little bit about English, I'd like to move on to my second word, educate. In high school, the main goal is to educate the students to learn a certain amount of information before graduation. There are 5 main disciplines in which students are required to learn before they graduate. Those 5 main disciplines is natural sciences, social sciences, mathematics, physical education, and of course English. Now, even though students are required to learn those 5 disciplines, there's also other requirements in order to graduate. In fact, many students have to take electives, but the other thing that some high schools require is a high school exit exam. Although it is not required to be taught in school, in some states, there are a lot of states which actually require a high school exit exam to be completed prior to graduation. In fact, according to the Council of Chief State Officers, the number of states which require a high school exit exam prior to graduation is 24 states. while 26 states do not require this. If you look here at my visual aid, you'll see that in yellow highlights is a list of states which require and do not require a high school exit exam to be taken prior to graduation. So, as you can see, about half of the states require a high school exit exam, while the other half does not. And as the debate continues to discuss whether or not a federal law should be required to initiate a high school exit exam, only time will tell. So now that I talked to you about my second word, educate, I'd like to move on and talk about my third word, which is enable. In high school, the main goal for teachers is to enable their students to stay in school. In fact, there is a unit system which all high schools in the United States require. And that unit system is a certain amount of units that you have to take in order to graduate from high school. Yet even though there's this unit system, and even though there are students that have to take that certain amount and meet those standards in order to graduate, there's actually a lot of students that fall behind. And in fact, to education officials, it is daunting how many students drop out. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, recent estimates indicate that 10% of youth ages 16 to 24 years old are not attending and have not completed high school, having earned neither a high school diploma nor a certificate of general education development, or a GED. So as you can see, there's still a large percentage of students which are dropping out. Yet there is a little bit of hope. The Department of Education has a dropout prevention program, as well as they teamed up with some organizations in order to try and enable students to continue staying in school. So now that you guys have listened to my three words, English, educate, and enable, I would like to challenge you all to teach your kids to learn English, be educated, and enable them to go to school so that they can pursue a higher education in their future. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Max Peters, who will talk about secondary education in Japan. Thank you.
And Max, before you start, let's just...